Steve Spurrier had some interesting quotes this week. And, you know, essentially what he said is that Georgia fans need to be a little bit more appreciative of Kirby Smart. And his exact quote, he essentially said that winning an SEC championship is the second hardest thing there is to do in college football. So the assumption there obviously is that the first hardest thing to do is to win a national championship, but that the second hardest thing to do is to win a Southeastern Conference title. And he actually even went on to say he felt like Kirby Smart had a better season than everyone but Ryan Day. And it's kind of hard to argue with his logic, but I ask you, TJ, in the playoff era, does a conference championship mean as much? I don't think he's wrong in saying it's the second hardest thing to do to win the SEC. I think that's accurate. But does it carry the same weight now that we have 84 bajillion teams in the playoffs?
Yeah, yes and no. You know, like I don't think there's a great answer. I would agree that it's probably the second hardest thing to do. Although I guess the bigger question is like the gap between 1 and 2 is so large, right? Like winning the Big Ten is still incredibly hard. You know, like it's not like it's the gap between 1 and 2 is wider than what would you say the third hardest thing to do is winning the Big Ten, right? So like the gap between 1 and 2 is much wider to me than the gap between 2 and 3. What I think makes it hard, what makes
I don't agree with that. I don't know that I agree with that, but go on.
I mean, that's fine.
I don't
look at the team that won the
winning the Big 12, Big 10 are really in the same sphere still. I think that the Big 10 is top heavy. I think they have probably
it's really hard to win it though.
Really, I mean,
for those top teams, you know,
it's not that hard to win it for those top teams.
How many SEC teams legitimately could have won the SEC this year?
A lot.
3 or 4? No. I mean, who were the teams that really could in the SEC? Who could have gotten to Atlanta and actually won that game? Georgia and Texas.
Georgia and Texas. It depends on who your opponent is. Ole Miss, Tennessee.
I don't think Tennessee. I don't think Tennessee could have won the SEC championship. I think they had a really favorable schedule that got them to 10 wins. It
totally depends on how your schedule is set up, whether or not you
even. That's why Tennessee got blown out by Georgia. I don't think they could have won that championship.
I just think it is a battle every single week. So surviving that battle and getting there is more difficult than surviving the Big Ten schedule and getting there.
I think I'd agree with that.
But that's
but that's why I think winning the national championship is much harder. Like I think that gap is much harder. Because to win 4 games in the playoffs is hard to me. Like way harder.
It's a feat, but it is.
And so
I think the gap to the Big Ten is probably. I think winning a national championship is the hardest thing. I think the gap between winning the national championship and an SEC is about as big as the gap between winning the SEC and winning the Big Ten.
I'd probably have it a little tougher because I mean, you have to make it. The other thing about the SEC too is the so much of getting to a conference championship now in the SEC is luck. Like there's a lot of luck involved because of the fact
that's not the more teams you add to a conference, the more you're relying on the luck of scheduling,
and the luck of just conference tiebreakers. There was a scenario with like 2 weeks to go where we could have had like 6 SEC teams with 2 losses, which just is lucky at that point if you get in, right? Like you're relying on what other teams have done to help your conference standings and things like that. Like, so some of it's luck too, you know, with tiebreakers and stuff. So the bigger question to me is not necessarily how hard it is to win. It's like how relevant it is going to be going forward. And I think that in the Big Ten and the SEC specifically, I think there's a lot of pride in winning that conference.
For sure, winning your conference. Yeah.
And I think that's going to subside.
Yeah.
I think that is going to drop as conference realignment that may be on pause as that continues to change. Like when North Carolina eventually gets added or Virginia gets added or Clemson gets added or whatever.
The SEC doesn't have any interest in expanding right now. That's
not what I just said. I just said it was on pause.
No, I know.
They will expand in the next 5 or 6 years. Like when we go to, whether we go to super conferences, whatever we do.
I know you want that as an SEC or an ACC fan that wants out of that conference as a Florida State fan, but I don't know that I agree with that.
Okay, well then we can revisit the conversation in 5 years. That's not really what's important to me. As more teams are added to conferences, and as we get closer to super leagues or whatever, like as we get closer to the NFLization of college football,
Yeah.
I do think the importance of winning the SEC is going to subside.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm not saying it becomes unimportant. I'm just telling you the importance of winning that is
Yeah.
going to go down. You've
Yeah.
got literal SEC coaches of some of the teams that you just mentioned could have possibly won this thing in Ole Miss. Like Ole Miss, we would say is our third most likely team to have won it this year, them or Tennessee. You've got their coach coming out and saying, I don't even know that we want to play in this thing. Right. And so when coaches are starting to say that,
I mean,
I think that I think that signals
yeah.
and I think that other coaches probably think it, just don't want to say it out loud because Lane's
Like,
willing to say
that's
more
what
than
you
most
think
people.
out loud. Yeah.
I I think that when coaches start to have that mindset of I don't even know if we want to play in this thing,
Yeah.
because as nice as it is to win an SEC championship, you've got the problem that Georgia has right now.
Yeah.
Who really cares?
Yeah.
Like Georgia fans are not beating their chest. Now, I will say, if a South Carolina could have gotten in, if a Florida could have gotten in over their because of their last few years, if an Ole Miss could have won it for the first time, yes, it would have meant something. But
Yeah.
to Georgia and Texas, like their fans don't even care. And so you've got coaches that
Well,
care less.
Texas fans just care because they want to say they were able to come into a new conference and win. But
I don't think that. I think going forward, the importance of winning. I mean, do you think Oregon fans care about winning the Big Ten right now? Georgia fans don't care about winning the SEC. Oregon fans don't care about winning that. Arizona State, I'm sure they're happy. Clemson fans don't care about winning the ACC this year. They don't care at all. They know they backdoored into it. They know that they had 4 losses overall. They don't care at all about what. And so I do think that the importance, I'm not saying it goes away completely. I think that players want to win a national championship so much more than they want to win a conference. Coaches
yeah.
are now coming out and saying they don't care. And fans of winning teams, again, if a Missouri could have snuck in, if an A&M could have snuck in, a Florida, teams that haven't had a lot of success here recently, yes, it would have meant a lot. They could have, but the teams that are at the top, the Ohio States and the Michigans and the Penn States and the Oregons and the Georgias and Bamas, another SEC championship is great. You're happy about it for that week, and then you immediately forget about it and you think, all right, let's go try and win this whole thing.
Yeah,
If
I don't know. I don't know that I agree. And even if I see your point, it makes me very sad because I don't think, first of all, I don't think conference championships are going away because I think they're too big of a moneymaker for ESPN. And so I think if we're playing them, they should absolutely mean something. I'm old school SEC. I think it matters almost as much as winning a national title. But I mean, I get your point.
I'm not saying they don't mean anything ever.
I know.
I just think their importance is dying.
Yeah.
I also think, okay, so is this a hot take? This might be a hot take. I don't know that I don't think a championship game, and this is obviously a very non-American take, right? So maybe people will just think I'm a communist for saying this. I almost think what you do in the regular season is more impressive to me than what you do in a one-off game. Like I've always hold on. Slow down. At least let me make the point before you argue it. At least let me make the point before you argue it. In basketball, I've always thought that the regular season SEC champion or the ACC champion of the regular season was more impressive than a team that got hot in the tournament. And in a one-off football game, there's a little less variance, right? You may not just have a cold shooting night. Usually the better team is going to win in most games. But if in those years that you think about the years that Missouri made the championship, just because the East was terrible, and Alabama was going, or the one year Auburn played Missouri, and Auburn and Alabama were just so much better teams than Missouri and had less losses going into it. They weren't like 2 evenly matched teams. I do think removing divisions helps us a little bit. But I have always thought that what you've done over the course of 8 or 9 weeks in the Big Ten is more impressive than a team who just has a fluky win or gets lucky breaks or plays a team without their starting quarterback. And so I would actually be in favor of, I don't know if this will ever happen. This was proposed by one conference commissioner. I would be in favor of the regular season champion for conferences going to the playoff. Like
Well,
the
that's
team
how
that was the
that's
best
how the
throughout.
Pac-10 used to decide it. They didn't used to have a conference
The
champion.
ACC didn't used to have conference champion. I mean, the SEC did, way back in the day didn't have them either. Like if you go back far enough, the SEC didn't either. I think we added conference championship games because of, again, the revenue side of it. But to me, what you've done over 9 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever, to me is more important than
Well,
60
but I
minutes.
think that you had me. I agreed with you until the very end. Um, so I think what you are describing is why college football is unique and why we love this sport and we feel differently about it than almost anything else is that the regular season does matter the most and should matter the most, which is what everyone has argued about for why we shouldn't expand the playoffs and that it potentially devalues that regular season. I just think and things have changed because when the SEC added Oklahoma and Texas, but in general, your payoff was the conference championship for your season of play, and the whole season did matter. And I mean, it's theoretical at this point whether or not we get down to those tiebreakers and stuff. That is a one-off essentially. In general, it's the most dominant two teams that get there. Do we have
Since
the
we've
possibility?
removed divisions, I will say. Because
No, prior
before with
to that.
I'm
Prior to
sorry.
that, too. There's one-offs, yes, but prior to that, the regular season mattered because in your division, you played each other. So
Well,
very,
no, I disagree.
very
No, I
rarely.
disagree there. I think it's better now than it was because again, remember how many years in a row we just sent the East to be sacrificial lambs to the West?
But
Like
the
the
West
East and
all
the
played
West were.
each other already. So they had already, every single team in the West had already played each other.
Right. My
So
point is
unless
that I
you had
thought
a scenario,
my point is that the best 2 or 3 teams were in the West. And so
I
if
don't
we were
think
going
it was that high. I think there's a lot of years where Alabama and LSU both could have made the argument to be in the SEC championship.
correct. Yes.
But outside of those two, there was very rarely a scenario where there was three. Can't think of a single
But
time.
we don't put 3 teams in one game. We only
No,
put
but
2.
what I'm saying is, you're saying the best three or four teams were in the West, and we sent the sacrificial lamb. No, it was possible that there were the best two teams were in the West, but it is not ever a scenario where Georgia or Florida or Tennessee wasn't at least the third best team in the SEC.
I don't know. Probably
That is
2013. I mean, 13 would have been when Missouri went. I mean, you literally just disproved it by saying that Georgia, Tennessee, and when Missouri went in 2013, come on, Auburn, LSU, and Bama were better.
I don't know. I don't agree. I think Bama and LSU consistently were at the top of this conference. And listen, we got them in a national championship, even if we didn't get them in the conference championship that year. That happened, right? So it still worked itself out. But I disagree. I personally think, and as the actual SEC person here, I think
You
it
have
was
to fight
better
this battle, yeah, even if
prior
it doesn't make sense.
two divisions. I think, unfortunately, we have too many teams in the conference, which is what makes you rely too much on schedule. I liked it a lot better when you played everybody in your side of the division. It was decided on the field.
Now, the fact that you said Alabama and LSU, there were years where they were the best 2 teams, and we weren't getting that in SEC
But then
championship.
we got it in the national championship. So
Only once. One time.
it wasn't always the case. It's not like it was regularly they were the two best and then there
The
was
two.
three or four.
I disagree with that. It did happen regularly. The 2 years that Missouri went, we could have had no divisions that year. The 2 years Florida went under McElwain, we could have had no divisions that year, right? Like there were certainly several years
Still the
where it
exception,
worked out
not the
where it
rule.
didn't happen.
It's the exception,
I
not
think eliminating divisions was smart. I think that was a good
great.
move.
I think there's too many. The only way that I could agree with it is if everybody played each other, or at the very least, we were back down to 12 SEC teams. We have too many teams to eliminate the divisions, in my opinion. But
Yeah, I don't know.
I digress.
I
We're
would
not going to agree to this, so I think
I
we
would
should move
I
on.
would always rather see the best 2 teams and not the fact that we have unbalanced divisions. I would always rather see the best 2 teams in the conference. I don't think that's a hot take.
So the best teams should always make the championships, regardless of schedule. Is what you're saying?
The teams with the best, like the way that we have it set up, yes, the best 2 teams based on an SEC schedule should make the conference championship.
But you're saying, but head to head doesn't matter in what you're saying because they had played each other in those scenarios when everybody in the division played each other.
That's fine. Yeah. Sometimes,
I'm just
sometimes the
wondering
East,
from this
sometimes,
FSU guy who was saying you play the schedule you're dealt, and we should have been
some-
there, and but wasn't one of
sometimes
those.
the,
So
yeah,
just
sometimes the schedules are unbalanced, but I certainly would take the teams that won. I mean, I'm not sure what your point is. You think that even if one division is weaker, that team should go because they played all the other weaker teams too?
I'm just saying
Like
I think
Missouri was right to go those years because they played a bunch of weak SEC teams.
they didn't play a bunch of weak SAT teams. They played everybody in the East, and they played West teams as well. It's not like
But
it's
if everybody in the East is bad one year, then that team deserves to go, not just the second best team
how
in
do
the
you
West.
determine what is bad? If you're saying
If
conference, your
Florida went
record should
4-8,
matter.
Georgia went 6-6. I mean, I don't.
LSU didn't have a better record than Missouri that year, did they? Your Missouri. What was Missouri's record?
9-3, 10-2.
Which was it?
I don't have Missouri.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying it's they played the schedule they were dealt. They played by the rules. They got to the championship. I thought those were things you like.
Missouri, LSU won 10 games, and Missouri in 2013 won 10 games as well.
Okay, so
In the
they
East.
so you're saying the eye test is what should matter in that situation. FSU doesn't normally like the eye test.
This is an SEC thing. The FSU jabs are great, but
No, but
I don't know what what I'm telling you
they
is that
had
I
the
like the
same
divisions
schedule as
gone.
or the same record as LSU, and they played the schedule they were made, and the rules put them there. I don't. But
So
then your
you,
argument should be LSU instead.
I just don't understand the argument for not just
For
putting
no
the
divisions,
teams with the.
because I like the tradition. I like the I personally think it was set up better when there were divisions within the conference. I think it
It
has
was definitely
historically
easier for
accurate.
Florida.
I think.
It was easier for Florida to make it when there were divisions for sure.
I mean, I don't know that I think that that's. I mean, Florida's schedule is so difficult this past year that division, not division, whatever else, it would have been terrible. We still kept all of our traditional East people for the most part. We don't play South Carolina.
Or
Um,
Vandy.
but we still play Georgia, and we still play Tennessee, which are the only teams in general that were keeping us out of there for the most part. South Carolina did keep us out in
Except for those 2 years that Missouri's did. Those 2 years Missouri did too. Count too.
Missouri kept us out of it. I doubt that Missouri was the deal breaker for us if we were losing to Missouri that year.
13 and 14, right?
Yeah, but did that keep us out?
I mean, you
Florida
certainly
was
didn't get
11
in.
11-1. No, I mean, but Florida was garbage. Is my point.
Right.
It wasn't that loss that kept us in.